Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Pope Metallicus, and welcome back to Rock and Roll Religion, where we've got one of my favorite modern bands for you today. We are talking the more current era releases from one of the best power metal bands out there right now, and kind of the face of the genre. We are talking about Sabaton. So, without further ado, let's get the panel in here. First of all, our evil robot, the Hellion himself, Lord Bathmat. I mean, the Sentinel.
Hail.
How's it going, man?
It's going great, man. I can't wait to deep dive into Sabaton.
Yeah, this is going to get good. And then we have our sentient plant factory here. It's our Nerbs.
What is up?
How's it going, man?
It's going pretty good. Pretty good. Hope you guys are doing well. Glad to be back here. Thank you for having me on as always. And yeah, excited to talk more about Sabaton. Really dig into it.
Absolutely, man. And then joining us, the guy who requested this video, and I know he's a big fan of it. I wouldn't have done this for a while if he hadn't. We have DragonMaster 360. So how you doing, man?
Dude, are you okay? I did that on purpose. I'll admit it. I did that on purpose. I like making people laugh. It's in my nature.
Well, we're on the right channel for that. I don't think Paris is going to be joining us today. He's got a friend or personal things going on, but he wanted to be here. Actually, he's actually a fan of the band.
Oh, okay.
Which is unusual given his usual musical taste, but but he actually really digs him. So, you know, unfortunately, he couldn't be here for this one. So,
Sabaton's a good one.
It will be. And then, yeah. Yes, my graphics before I forget.
There we go.
Before we get into the conversation and I don't put it up for another hour like usually happens. But yeah, getting into the first, I mean, this is like the period where I think not only did they really hit their stride, they really just like they had hit their stride and were just continuing to put out quality content at this point.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those bands where everything they do is good.
Yeah.
I mean, they have individual songs on their records that I like more or less, but like all of it is actually fairly good.
Yeah. I would definitely agree. I was a little bit surprised at first. I was like, okay, these guys aren't as heavy as I was thinking they would be, you know, the power metal label. But then as I started listening to more, I'm like, these guys are fucking sick. I see why so many people like them. Like they're just really good.
Yeah, they're especially their guitar tone is less like bone crushing and less like deep and like more like Iced Earth or something like that. It's more like the classic tuning, but it's what they do with it that's absolutely sick, where they just tell you a story.
Yeah. Oh,
they're also Swedish, which makes them have a slant towards the more poppy presentation of music, I might suggest. Like ABBA. ABBA was a super huge influence on the Swedes. So that might explain some of it.
And actually, they make jokes that they're going to cover ABBA songs at some point.
Even Bodum covered ABBA songs.
Yes, they did.
And Yngwie covered ABBA songs too. He did a great cover of Gimme Gimme Your Love Tonight or something like that.
Yep. Which, you know, something about Sweden. They're a little odd, but we love them anyway.
Right.
That's right.
They invented Minecraft.
That's true. And that guy probably made the most money out of any business deal I've ever seen where, you know, this is just one guy doing it in his spare time and ends up getting bought out by Microsoft for like $4 billion or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
That's one of those like, wow, I did this game in my spare time and now I never need to do anything again. But no, I mean, this band, especially like the first album we're going to talk about here is really interesting for them because not only do they do it in 2 languages, it's actually about their own history with Carolus Rex, where this album is entirely focused around the history of the Swedish Empire.
Oh,
okay.
That brief period of expansion they had under Karl XII and a couple other guys to basically push Russia out of the Baltic and stuff like that, and also come after Germany a little bit. And they were actually pretty successful at it for a while.
Okay.
They really actually gave most of the mainland European countries a run for their money. If you want to look up more about it, about this period, it's called the 30 Years' War.
Okay, I have heard about the 30-Year War, but didn't know exactly what that was about.
Not to be confused with the 100 Years' War, which was England and France again.
Right.
For the 15th time.
Yeah.
The war franchise that won't die.
Yeah, exactly. It's the military edition of Land Before Time.
Oh no, I need to watch that movie. Oh.
No, you really
It's
don't.
fucking hilarious.
You need to watch the first one, and that's it.
That's it. Yeah.
But no, I mean, some of these songs are absolutely some of their best too. Like "Lion from the first pair of Dominant Mars Baltisi, and then into "Lion from the North" are just both just. It's like a nice like epic intro going into an absolute fucking banger to launch this album, and I could not be happier with that because it's exactly what Sabaton does well. Extremely high paced, freaking high energy songs that just come out and just amp you up.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, almost everything on this, almost everything on this album just rocks. Even some of the ones I'm less that are more down paced, like "Lifetime of War," is actually one of the better songs on the album because of just how epic and how much effort they put into it and how much emotion they put into the lyrics. Which actually on the Swedish version of this album, "Lifetime of War" actually has different lyrics. Like it's actually a completely different song that was made to the same beat, which I think is pretty cool.
I just listen to the English versions because I'm an idiot.
Well, I mean, this was the only one they did a Swedish version on because the way they saw it was, well, we're doing this. It's like we're doing this about Swedish history. We might as well record it in Swedish.
Right.
Okay. So to be clear, the entire album is in Swedish.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
In Swedish and English. There's
two different versions of the album. There have an English version and a Swedish version, and the cool part is on their live show, they'll actually ask the audience if they want to hear one of the songs off this record in Swedish or English. Because a lot of these are still in their live set today.
Okay.
And almost 100% of the time, the crowd will pick Swedish.
I'm not surprised. I mean, I would want to listen to it in the original Swedish for sure. Yeah.
Well, I mean, they write everything in English, but I think it's more they want to hear something. I mean, we hear the English version all the time. We want to hear it in Swedish because it's a little bit different sound to it, which I think is cool. But
the same thing. Too much, it gets monotonous and boring, and eventually you want to change the pace.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with a lot of it too is it's something that you don't hear from any other bands because there's almost nobody who sings in Swedish. It's not as far as I'm aware. There's some that sing in German, Rammstein coming to mind, but a lot of guys don't really. I mean, almost everybody who's Scandinavian sings in English because that's an international language, and they all get taught it in school. So it's an easy language for them to translate. And that's why English has kind of become the language of heavy metal in general, because pretty much no matter where you're from, your audience is speaking English. Whether you be English, American, whatever, that's just kind of a thing. But
we are the melting pot of the world.
Well, I mean, it's mostly because heavy metal and rock and roll in general are American and English in their origins. So that's kind of where it started and where most of the bands came from. So it just kind of became the hegemon in the community. It would be like, somebody making salsa music in English. It would just sound odd.
Right.
It would just be like, don't get me wrong, I'm glad I can understand what he's saying, but this is a little weird.
Something's wrong. I can feel it.
That would be interesting to hear, though. Like, hear someone do like Delta blues or something like that in Spanish. It would be interesting.
It'd be very strange, but interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it would be worth a shot. Just be like,
Right.
all right. But no, I mean, like I said, this album, I mean, it still has tracks that are played every nightly in their live set today. Carolus Rex they've played all 4 times I've seen them. And Killing Ground actually was one of them. It wasn't a constant member, but the first time I saw them, they played it. Caroline's Prayer, I don't think they do because that requires a lot more organs and stuff like that. So that's probably something they do in more Europe when they can actually do their full stage show. Because, like, don't get me wrong, they do a good job over here too, but it's not, an 80,000 person arena where they have all sorts of pyro and they have like an actual tank that they can drive around on stage. That's also the drum riser. And also, like, they have like, all this set stuff like for the Great Tour and stuff like that. They did barbed wire and sandbags and all that kind of stuff.
All drum risers should be tanks, by the way.
I agree with this.
Or either tanks or some sort of mech warrior thing.
Yes, I
imagine
agree.
like a 100%. Drum riser that looks like a fucking mech warrior and then shoots out pyro from like the guns and shit.
That would be like
Atlas.
Epic.
Atlas.
I could see it.
Giant Atlas head, drum on the top.
Or a king crab because it's nice and flat. So you can have the kind of the most of the body of it and then the drum riser on the back of it. That would be interesting.
There you go.
Or do what Priest did in the 80s and put it up on top of the head of that freaking metal behemoth.
Yes.
Like
on
for
the Turbo Tour? Yes.
Was it the Turbo Tour?
It was the Turbo Tour.
I thought it was Defenders of the Faith.
Defenders of the Faith, I think, might have had something similar, but I know for a fact it was on the Turbo Tour that they had this big like metal robot thing on stage.
Yeah, the thing from the cover.
Yeah.
From the cover of Defenders of the Faith, yeah. I thought that was the Defenders tour.
Let me just double check so we know for sure.
But I mean, these guys, and the cool part is earlier in their career, they've done a couple songs. Instead of military history, they'll do like a mashup of heavy metal, either band names or song lyrics, and kind of make a song out of it.
Metal Ripper.
Yeah, Metal Ripper, Metal Crew. And I think that's really creative and really cool, where you're taking like other bands' names and like putting them into context and just making a song out of it. And it actually makes sense too. And which is not required in some metal bands, by the way. Look up some of their some bands' lyrics. It's just like, you have absolutely no idea what you're saying, do you? Nope. But it doesn't matter. It sounds awesome, and that's all people care.
So it was on the Turbo Tour.
Okay.
It was the Fuel for Life tour, which was the 1986 to 1987 Turbo Tour that they had this metal, like huge metal tank with.
Nice.
It looks incredible. It should have been used for the Defenders of the Faith tour. Absolutely, it makes more sense.
Because it was on the cover of the album.
Exactly.
They might not have finished it in time, but it's so expensive they still wanted to use it.
Maybe that was the thing. Maybe, yeah.
Because I know that's happened to bands before too, where it's just like, I mean, it's not ready in time, but this cost a fortune, so we're gonna use it.
Yeah, definitely.
Or at least that's what it was with Motorhead's Bomber light rig that they had for the album. And they've used it on every tour since, because they're just like, and I think Airborne uses it now because it was massively expensive at the time. They're just like, yeah, we're getting our money's worth out of this thing. But yeah. And then we move into still a great album, but probably my least favorite out of all of these, which is Heroes.
Oh man, I didn't. Gosh darn it, I didn't listen to this one. Whenever I opened up, I was going to ask you, but I feel like that would look stupid or whatnot.
Yeah, no worries.
So I just searched up Sabaton albums or whatnot. So I listened to the 4. They're like after Carolus Rex.
Yep.
For some reason, this album was not in the list chronologically. I
That's
don't
weird.
know why.
Because this
Hang on.
is. I mean, I can show you the
I
back of
can
the
show
album
you.
cover right here. It says 20. It's 2014. But
One second.
I mean, you've probably heard most of these anyway, because some of these are some of their biggest hits.
Let's see. Night Witches, yes. No Bolts Fly. Smoking Snakes. Yes, Inmate. I love Inmate.
That is a hell of a
Hell and,
story too.
Mm.
oh yeah.
Mhm.
To
I
Hell
mean,
and Back. I
you
love
want
that
to
one.
talk about a man with balls too big to be able to walk.
Right.
A guy who goes into Auschwitz to find out what's going on there, and then willingly goes back in to continue
Okay.
providing intelligence.
Okay. So after To Hell and Back, all the songs after that I have not heard.
Resistant Bite's really good.
Oh, I have seen that one. I'm sorry, I didn't see that.
Soldier of Three Armies is actually a very interesting one.
I haven't heard that one.
It's not my favorite song from them, but it's one of the best stories they've ever told. Of this guy, this Finnish guy who hated the Russians so much that he fought in 3 different armies to fight communism.
Just decide already, okay? Just pick your
Oh no,
faction.
well,
Okay.
because one of them would stop fighting the Russians, and then he'd move on to the next one. Because he started fighting them in '39 in the Winter War in Finland, because that's where he's from. His name is Larry Allen Turney.
What
and
a
then
very that's a very
well, because he finished his life as Larry Allen Thorne.
oh, okay.
And then he's fought with the Germans against the Soviets. And then after that, he moved to the United States after the war and joined the very beginnings of the American Army Special Forces. And then fought the Viet Cong. So he was actually did fight in 3 armies.
That's nuts, man.
And by choice too. It's not like, a lot of guys where the government's not really stable or whatever, and then the army keeps changing or whatever. But he was just part of all 3 because he wanted to be, because he really didn't like communism very much, which I can't blame him.
No, just get in touch with a rogue CIA agent, strike up a shady deal with some Nicolas Cage Lord of War figure, and you're fine.
Well, this is before a lot of that happened, because he was around in the '60s. So
I wasn't talking about time period. I was just talking about the type of person they were. That's all.
Oh, I mean, no, he would be the CIA absolutely would have loved this guy. And unfortunately, he was killed. I believe he was killed in a helicopter crash in Vietnam. So, which is a very interesting way for a guy like this to go out.
Sad.
It is, but these things happen to the best of us. I mean, but no, Far From the Fame's not really that good. And the Ballad of Bull is probably my least favorite Sabaton song of all time, but it's still pretty good.
So what you're saying is I'm not missing much?
I wouldn't say you're not missing much, but I'm saying like that if you're gonna skip an album, this was probably the one to skip listening to all of, in my opinion, anyway.
Okay, I hope I haven't skipped any more. Darn Brave results.
Yeah, Brave's good for a lot of things. Search results, not as much.
Yeah.
Just a quick question: is this like a part 2 Sabaton discography discussion?
Yes, this is from Coryllis Rex up to the present day.
Okay, because I was just wondering, because the 2 Sabaton albums that are my favorite are Art of War and the one just before that.
No, that wasn't Coat of Arms.
Coat of Arms, yes. Those 2 are my absolute favorite.
Yeah, we'll get to those at some point, but I wanted to do their more recent stuff because this is the stuff you'll hear more now.
Okay.
If you don't mind, can I share my screen just to show you the search results?
Yeah, sure, go for it.
Cool. Share screen, Brave tab, share.
There we go.
So here's Coryllis Rex.
Yeah.
And 2012 it skips everything else and goes straight to 2019.
I can see I can see why. They're out of order.
Oh, dadgummit.
Yeah, they're
I
not
am
in.
so sorry.
No, they're not in order because the Last Stand's on there, and that's 2016.
I am so sorry.
Yeah, no worries. But these are the three that people are really going to want to talk about because these are their last three, and holy shit, what a trio!
Great War, Last Stand, and War to End All Wars. These three
Yep.
right here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, I listened to the important ones.
We'll get into those, and man, those are just. Here we go. But yeah, most of these are actually centered around World War II in various ways, of just random things around that. And I do love that with this band where they kind of focus on one type of thing at a time.
Please work.
And then and the album or the title of the album will tell you roughly what you're about to hear. Heroes. These are all guys who, people or groups who did really, really interesting and heroic things and were rewarded for it. Except in the case of inmate 4859, because I don't know if you guys know what happened to him.
No.
After the war, the Russians who took control of Poland after that basically rounded up all the people who were former resistance members and had them all shot.
Ugh.
And he was a captain in the Polish resistance because it's the Soviet Union and they're fucking assholes.
Naturally.
Well, I mean, even during the war, they had the chance. This is actually, hey Spider, how's it going, man? Been a while. But they actually had the chance to, and this is actually an earlier Sabaton song off one of their earlier albums, Warsaw, where in 1944. The Soviets were basically liberating Warsaw, and they had been communicating with the Polish resistance and the partisans in the city to kind of coordinate action, so that right about the same time the Russians were going to come in and storm the city, all of a sudden the resistance would start kicking up a fuss and blowing up checkpoints, just basically rising up and being a massive pain in the butt for the Germans. So they planned it all out, and it went off without a hitch, and the Poles really started, getting into it and hooking and jabbing with the Germans, and the Russians watched all this happening, and basically sat there and waited for the Germans to finish exterminating the last of the Polish resistance, to then come in and take the city. Because they didn't want to deal with the Polish resistance fighters afterwards, because they were planning on being pretty much just as evil to the Poles as the Germans had been.
What a bunch of jerks!
Mm-hmm. Pretty much as dickish as everyone thought the Soviet Union could get to be, they got worse.
How low can you go?
They pretty much figured that one out. But Megadog, haven't seen you here before, so welcome to it, man. And I've seen Sabaton live a bunch of times, and they're a fantastic band. Oh, I haven't seen them in Europe yet. That's on my list because I've seen video of it, and Jesus, they're great. But no, and then moving into the first album I really heard from them, this is the one that got me into them. And then I think within a week of hearing this album, I own most of it. It's a valid question.
Valid question.
Dad.
Nah, just bad migraine.
Yeah, fair enough.
And also from an actual chat, apparently.
Yep. I know exactly who that is. And then this album, The Last Stand, of some of the best songs that they've ever done, and with some of the coolest topics too, because there's nothing better for movies or TV shows or something like that than just this heroic final stand, Helm's Deep or frickin' The Last Stand in Saving Private Ryan or something like that, or Zulu, the whole movie, which they actually do a song on this record.
Zulu's attack, fight back to.
Oh hell yeah!
Terrible. Sorry.
I think that's part of what their success too. Is Joaquin is actually not a trained singer, and he just has that power at that low end with that
Okay.
baritone. That he actually started out as their keyboard player, and
that
I
makes
did
sense.
not know that.
and he still does all of their keyboard stuff on the albums.
Yeah.
And basically they needed to record a demo,
Mm-hmm.
and they were like, okay, well, we can't find a singer, so Joaquin, you just do it for the demo, and then we'll find a singer. And then
he stuck with it.
well, and then the way he tells it is, and then the lazy bastards never went and found another singer. So I got stuck with it.
Just like Metallica and Megadeth in a way.
Well, I think Dave always meant to be the singer for Megadeth.
Yeah, no, his voice fits so well with it. It really does.
Not to mention, it's his personality where he's kind of got to be out in front. And
I totally agree. It's the same with Metallica too.
Well, he was already in that. He was already doing that with Metallica, and that kind of caused friction between him and James.
Mm-hmm.
Because, he's supposed to be the lead guitarist, so guitarists don't talk. You're over on the corner,
right?
And then he was actually taking part of the frontman role, and I think that kind of threw a lot of people off. And then he just went and did it on his own. But no, this album and all the album art for this band from freaking as far back as I can remember, it's just been excellent. Like all of these covers are just gorgeous.
Dude, oh wow.
The album art's pretty good. I like it.
Man.
It's all done by the same guy, I think, because it's very similar art. I think his name is Peter Salai.
Okay.
Or Salai. I don't know how to pronounce it correctly, but anyway,
Salai would work.
Very, very good artist, and just I love how they include a lot of the subject matter they're talking about too, from pretty much the entire era. And you can see the Polish winged hussars in there. You can see the samurai from Shirayama.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, as epic and bombastic as they are on their albums, it's better live.
Kind of to the on the I think it's on the left side of the album cover. Maybe on the very left side. Is that a Spartan warrior?
Yes, it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. My eyes are not deceiving me, and I did not need my glasses to see that. Yay!
And then one of my favorite stories off of this record, and actually on the far right too. And then he just mentions my favorite song on this record, Lost Battalion. It's actually the first one I ever heard from them, and I think the story behind it is cool as hell. Where basically an American unit during World War I were the only ones to accomplish their objective in a given assault, and as a result, basically ended up cut off and surrounded behind the Germans.
Wow!
For like 3 days, and they were just getting the crap pounded out of them and refused to fall back. And I think, but they had like 700 men went into that wood, and I think 3 days later, like less than 100 of them walked out.
Yikes!
Wow.
It's actually a very good movie too, man. The Lost Battalion. It's a very, very good movie. The production value is kind of down there because I think it was made for TV movie, but it's actually a very good one. Yeah, once again, because the French screwed up. I think I said this on Gilded the other day. If you go far enough back, you can blame literally everything on the French.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, I would agree. The cause of most wars are either the French or women.
Well, I mean, Helen of Troy.
Yes, exactly.
No argument there.
Exactly.
No argument for me there. Oh man.
Or just Germany being Germany.
Yes. Who goes to war over some? It's amazing.
Where it's like, no, Germany, you can't have the rest of Europe. It's like, but why not? We do better. Yes, we know, but they have to have a thing too.
That is funny.
But no, I mean, Sparta is a great opening track. Last Dying Breath is actually a really cool speech, and I don't want to play it here because we'll get struck. But they did a lot when they played in Belgrade for the first time. They actually played that because the song is written about a speech that I forget the name of the commander, but one of the defenders of Belgrade in World War One. It was the last speech he gave to his men before they all did, held the line pretty much to the last man, and just one of the most motivating things. And that letter was republished in newspapers across Serbia. So like every Serbian school kid grows up reading that speech and like word for word, and like the crowd was absolutely going fucking nuts when they started playing that. It was like Poland when the first time they played 40-1 there, and they were just going nuts because it's always cool to hear them sing about your country, and they sing about pretty much everybody's.
Yeah.
Or are going to at some point because they show no signs of slowing down on this. Pretty much every 2 years, they come out with an album and then tour.
That should be how it is for every band. Enough of this 8-10 years between album bullshit.
Yeah, at least until you get old and at least until you get older and get more established, and then kind of hit the maintenance portion of your career.
Yeah,
pretty much.
Yeah.
Or you've just lost it, and at that point, when do you just where do you just give up and just kind of call it a career?
Some musicians that just don't, they keep playing until they die, but that's
Rolling Stones
thing.
I will not be surprised if Keith Richards keels over. Well, no, not Keith Richards. He'll never die. But I would not be surprised if Mick Jagger actually kicks it on stage.
Yeah.
I mean, he's already 89?
Insane, man.
And they're still touring.
Yeah.
They're definitely creeping up into their 80s for sure.
And the worst part of that is they haven't been good since 1976.
That is sad.
Sympathy for the Devil was probably the last good record they did, and that was 76, 77. So it's just guys, it's fine. You've made more money than God, or you should have. Cocaine's not that expensive.
So if I may, so personal favorite tracks from this album, Winged Hussars, of course.
That was a great one.
Oh yeah.
And it turned into a meme in their fan groups too. Whenever anyone would say anything, and then somebody would immediately follow with a comment, and then the Winged Hussars arrived, and it was the best thing ever for 6 months.
Anyway, that's sad. I hate when those good memes die. But anyways, Last Stand, even though it was the first proper Sabaton song that I listened to that actually got me interested into it, actually the very first Sabaton song that I actually listened to was the Christmas Truce.
Which we'll get to on a later album.
Nice. So yeah. But on this album, actually, the one I find really interesting is the Last Battle one. Oh, hi, Fizz.
Hey, Fizz. The Last Battle is a very interesting story.
It's their most optimistic song.
Well, it's a very optimistic song from them. I wouldn't say the most optimistic, but it's it's a very interesting one in the story behind it, which I can't tell very well because it's actually kind of a confusing story. They have their own channel on YouTube called Sabaton History. If you want to find out the stories behind these songs, they actually have Indy Nidell from the Great War Channel, and he goes through the history because he's a friend of the band apparently, and he goes through all the history of it, and they actually go into a little of the making of the songs and why they chose these and stuff like that. So it's actually a really cool channel that you should absolutely check out.
I've watched a few of those.
Yeah, they're great. I think I've seen all of them. Well, at least all the ones they've done. Diary of an Unknown Soldier, it's not the greatest song on this album. It's still a good song, but it's it doesn't have the punch of The Last Stand or Rourke's Drift.
Oh man.
Which
Roach
anyone who's ever seen the
Drift.
anyone who's ever seen the movie Zulu will absolutely understand know where Rourke's Drift came from immediately.
I haven't seen the movie, but man, that song is just, if you listen to it once, just once,
Mm-hmm.
it gets in your head and it doesn't get out.
And then and the cool part is like these weren't like last stands where they were successful. Like Bannockburn, they actually won. Rourke's Drift, they actually won. The Last Stand, the Swiss Guard died to the last man, but accomplished the objective.
Yeah.
So that counts as a win. The Lost Battalion, they actually won in a way because the Germans had to throw so much in the way of reinforcements of troops to break them out of there, that basically it weakened the entire line to the point where the Americans or the French on either side could actually advance. And so they actually ended up accomplishing more than what they thought they would. And of course, Winged Hussars, they ended up destroying the living shit out of the Ottomans.
Yeah.
And the last battle was actually an interesting one. Basically, the synopsis is basically the United States and a couple of British former prisoners, I guess, giving the Germans their weapons back to go fight the SS.
Oh man!
Because not many people remember this, but even the regular Wehrmacht soldiers hated the fucking SS.
Yeah.
Man, just the lyrics. Gosh darn it, they're on the tip of my tongue. It's like
it's actually one of the examples of why we have such a good relationship with Germany now.
Yeah.
Because pretty much as soon as the war was over, we all looked at the Russians and went, "Yeah, we're about to not be friends, aren't we?" But no, that was an interesting one. And actually, there's a story from the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan in here. It's Hill 3234.
I forgot the lyrics to that one, weirdly enough.
It's a story about this little mountaintop fob in Afghanistan. They got the absolute crap pounded out of it by the Mujahideen. Yes, and Chad's right. This is where they took an actual castle from a bunch of SS troops that had refused the surrender order. But yeah, I forget the exact story about these Soviets, but they held out, but it was like a close run thing. Like they were getting the absolute crap kicked out of them by the Mujahideen. And I think they lost a couple of helicopters trying to get those guys off that hilltop because they knew they couldn't evac them on the ground. So they were actually trying to get them out by air. And they did end up getting evac eventually, but the Mujahideen really took a toll on them.
So was it the Afghanistanians? Afghanistanians. I can't.
We call them either Afghans or Afghanis.
All right, Afghans. I feel weird whenever I say Afghans because I think of the blanket. But,
well, I mean, it's the same thing. We also call them a lot of other stuff that's not allowed on YouTube.
Yeah.
Anyways, but the Afghans, was it the Afghans attacking the Russians?
Yep. Yeah, the Soviets invaded Afghanistan in 1979 and spent the next decade trying to do what we were trying to do and also failed at. Because the pro-communist government had just fallen in Afghanistan in 1978, I think. Yeah, that will remain unspoken, at least live.
If you want to see those names, join Razor Fist Discord server. You should be able to catch the link in tonight. He's going to stream tonight. He didn't stream on Friday or Saturday.
But no, and Shirayama is an interesting one too, in that especially for the period it happened in, because most people think of the 1800s as the time where, it was very civilized era of warfare and stuff like that. But these guys were still playing by feudal rules.
Absolutely.
So
Japan didn't change anything up until the late 1900s. To be honest,
the late 19th century.
Yeah, the late 19th century. That's when they started bringing in some of the Western stuff.
And
I know people criticize, Hollywood versions of movies, but The Last Samurai is actually pretty authentic in terms of showing that shift, societal shift in Japan.
Yep. And Shirayama is actually about the same time period, and that was actually the final battle, and that was the true death of the samurai in Japan. And in true samurai fashion, they went out with freaking sword in hand, sword in hand, slashing down everything that came within reach. So eventually, the army just gunned them down, which that happens. It's also what happens when you bring a knife to a gunfight. But I will give them respect for they were standing up for their way of life and their way of doing things, and they fought to the last man. That's also true because Tom Cruise at that time was, was kind of one of those like, why is he here? Although there were Western advisors that were with the Imperial Army. We were the ones teaching them how to use all those guns that we just sold them. And we were giving them some pretty advanced tech for the time, too. We were, hey, Hunter, how's it going? But we were selling them some pretty advanced tech. We were selling them like steamships and Gatling guns and stuff like that.
That's right.
If you want to play a game that has that in it, Total War Shogun 2 actually has a campaign called Fall of the Samurai, where you can fight on either side of that period, and it's actually really cool. Some of the best gameplay I've seen in that game, and you really start to see modern warfare start to come out of it. Because all of a sudden artillery is much more accurate and explosive. Mm-hmm. So it basically turns into whoever has the most artillery is probably going to win in an open field battle. But it's a very interesting game, and I would heavily recommend it. But yeah, this album is the first one I saw. It's the first one I saw them live on, and I'm really glad I did. Actually, it's the torch shirt I'm wearing.
Oh, nice.
Because I've had this since 2016.
That is so cool.
Yeah, Chad. Artillery is king, but we don't tell them that because their heads are big enough. But
I really wish I had a muscle shirt that has paint, or not necessarily paint, but that looks like the vest that Joachim has. Not necessarily metal, but yeah.
They sell them, but yeah, I mean it's. Oh yeah, and their costumes on stage are freaking awesome. And they've been doing that for a long time too. But then going into this one, which is just this album, this album and the one after it are actually connected very closely. Not only on the subject matter, I think were mostly written at the same time as well. Mm. So we were talking about the Great War and its sequel. Which it's funny how they did a lot of World War II stuff from Coat of Arms and Art of War up into Heroes, and then ever since they've been doing a lot of World War I stuff. Mm-hmm. It's like, wait, you guys are telling the first story second. I was gonna say only Star Wars can do that.
The Kingsman movies, they did that recently.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, the latest one is a prequel taking place during World War I. That was actually a good movie.
In my opinion, actually better than the direct sequel with Pedro and Jeff Bridges.
I'm not sure. I don't think I've seen the new Kingsman.
Yeah, Soul Assassin. How's it going? And yeah, he's absolutely correct. That is the ultimate. I know more people who have said this got me into history than any other band I've ever seen, including Iron Maiden. And I guarantee that's where they got the idea is songs like Aces High and Alexander the Great, stuff like that. But
that's right. They were doing history metal before anybody.
Mm-hmm. And these guys took it to a whole nother level. Mm-hmm. And World War I is just such an interesting topic to talk about, and there's so much to cover that most people don't talk about.
Yeah,
there are heroes in this one, right? The track.
Sarajevo is actually the first one on the next album.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Whoops. And Primo Victoria is just fucking fantastic. Every June 6th, I will throw on that album and just play it, just because. Exactly. But yeah, Sarajevo. Actually, it depends on what version of the next album you have, because I had the original version, and it's not on there. It's actually only on the History Edition version. And Sarajevo is actually the same music as the last track, just with the lyrics changed.
Okay.
So we'll get into that when we get into the next album. But like this one, like the Future of Warfare, really good way to start off the album and kind of set the tone. And they were talking about, like, the changes that were happening in warfare and stuff like that. And there's so many different technologies that came about in this war that either weren't really fully fledged yet or needed some time to kind of grow into it, or to grow into themselves. And this war was where they all came about. Like, you started having infantry having to adjust to their tactics because the machine gun was now a thing. You had artillery being much more accurate. You had all of this stuff going on. And, the beginning of submarine warfare and aviation warfare. And it was just a really interesting time. And that's why this war was so deadly, because the tactics had not caught up to the technology yet. I mean, it took until 1916 for them to come up with what the future of warfare is about, which is tanks. And then Seven Pillars of Wisdom is an interesting one. It's it's based on a very famous movie, being Lawrence of Arabia, because this song is all about being all about T.E. Lawrence.
Okay.
And yeah, Fizz, we're getting there. Actually, the U.S. has some pretty interesting developments on that front. And by interesting, I mean horrifying. But and 82nd All the Way is an interesting one too, because it could have just as easily been off of Heroes, because the whole song is about Sergeant York. Basically, this dude captured an entire German position by himself with a 1911.
What?
They all surrendered to him. I think they didn't realize he was by himself, and the fact that, it was probably one of those, okay, nobody's crazy enough to come up here without without backup and take us all prisoner. There's got to be more. So they all just dropped their weapons. I can't tell you how many times in American military history that has happened. Where other armies would be like, the Americans can't do that. Only an insane person would do this. Sure enough, what's the first thing we do?
The most insane thing.
Yeah, it's like the one thing no one will ever expect, because we'd have to be absolute lunatics to try it.
Yep.
We're America, baby.
It's like, they can't do that. Watch me.
Hold my beer.
Yeah, I think it's a tie between us and the Canadians for the most hold my beer moments in military history.
Gotta love it.
Meanwhile, England's probably just watching. It's like, really? It's like, just because you can do crazy shit doesn't mean you have to. It's like, yeah, but it's really funny. They get so mad. And armies like the Germans, who are like used to fighting like normal, very, regimented, very, yeah, exactly. Like, we don't know what the fuck we're doing, so neither can they. And unfortunately, that's still how the military operates on almost a daily basis. But it works for the most part.
Yep.
And then, Attack of the Deadmen, I'm actually not familiar that much with the story behind this one, because it's more on the Eastern Front. I need to look a lot more into the Eastern Front, but
I can give you the short version.
Okay, here we go.
Basically, Russians attacked I think I get this wrong. Correct. Guys, correct me if I'm wrong. But from what I understand, basically Russians attacked a German German area where a bunch of guys were. Sorry, this is off the top of my head. And they attacked it with chlorine gas.
Mm-hmm.
All right, good. All right, next. Then but what happened was, even though they were dying, basically, some of the men had actually wrapped themselves in cloth against the chlorine gas's effects, and there was like a bunch of blood, and from what one video said, like pieces of their lungs falling out, stuff like that.
Yeah, chlorine gas is pretty nasty.
In other words, stuff we can't show on YouTube, and the sight was so bad that the Russians ran.
Well, I mean, that doesn't surprise me. The Russians ran away from a lot of stuff at that point.
Okay, but that's the short version of the story from what I gathered. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, but no, that's. I mean, the whole song was pretty much chemical warfare. Yeah, and like that was the result of that. Chad's saying you have the sides reversed, that it was the Austrians gassing the Russians, which makes sense. Which makes sense because the Russians didn't have much in the way of gas warfare.
Sorry, guys.
But no, hey Zach, how's it going, man? But no, chemical warfare was just, especially some of the early chemical weapons like chlorine gas, mustard gas, a couple of other ones, where it's not like modern chemical weapons where it'll kill you in minutes or pretty much immediately, depending on how heavy a dose you get. You'll sit there and hack your lungs up over the course of a week, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's almost as bad as radiation poisoning. But hang on one second. And then we have
Give me a sec.
The song about me and Chad's brethren. Being devil dogs. And Sentinel, is that you? I'm getting a weird buzz on your mic.
Let me see. Is that better?
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah, that's better. It sounded like a fan running or something like that.
Yeah.
Oh, you're good. Yeah, that's gone now.
Sounds good.
Hey, I'm glad to hear that, Soul. I mean, that's why I do this episode every week. Is talking about bands that people may not have heard of, or people may not have heard of everyone. But Chad knows what's about to happen. Devil Dogs.
Dogs.
A song not only written about my beloved United States Marine Corps, but about my goddamn regiment, 5th Marines.
It's one of my favorite songs off of this album specifically.
Yeah, it's such an amped song too.
This one and the next few songs after it, I love it. It's my favorite part of the album for sure. Devil Dogs kicks it off.
Yeah, this is all about the Battle of Belleau Wood, our first major engagement in the war.
Okay.
Where the 5th and 6th Marine regiments basically just charged the Germans down and just got in there and started just fighting them close up. It was the first time the Germans had to deal with with guys using shotguns in the trenches.
Fuck yeah, Marines, let's go.
Yeah, and if anyone out there knows U.S. Marines, we like knives and shotguns a lot. So we put a knife on the end of our shotgun.
Oh, yeah.
And by knife, I mean a goddamn machete.
Now
it's
that's
gotta be long enough to cut off a torso, you know.
Yeah, and the cool part was the shotgun we were using was a Winchester 1897.
Okay.
Which it was one of the first pump action shotguns, and it also didn't have what some modern ones do. It didn't have a trigger interrupt or a trigger disconnect, so you could hold down the trigger and pump. And it would, as soon as it fully locked again, it would fire. It's called slam firing.
Slam fire. Okay.
That's fucking awesome.
And you could ripple fire 6 rounds out of this thing, and then you had an 18-inch bayonet.
That's pretty fucking sick, dude.
Yeah, and it was brutal, and it was brutal enough that the Germans actually tried to call it a war crime to use them. And
is that like an automatic shotgun before there was an automatic shotgun?
I mean, it's not automatic because you have to Right, you have to rack the action manually.
Yeah, it's
Absolutely.
just a trigger mechanism, it sounds like.
Yeah,
Okay.
but yeah, but that was the other thing, is that the Germans tried to claim that was a war crime, and yet they were already using things like flamethrowers and chemical warfare. So
Yeah.
it was like, oh really, Mr. Kaiser, do we want to talk about who's the asshole here?
Don't point the finger when you've got a stick in your eye, right?
Right.
Right.
Or
That's
send somewhere
and this is
else.
actually true too. There was this was back in the area where most of the U.S. Army
Mm.
and even some of the Marines, most of them were recruited from the same areas,
Oh,
depending
yep.
on the unit.
Yep.
So you had a lot of the New York units. Everybody was carrying brass knuckles or had attached them to the end of their trench knife.
I was gonna say, yeah, when they also like have it attached to their knife as well. That's if you're gonna be in close quarters combat, that's exactly what you want to have.
And it was something that the Germans were not used to, because they weren't
Mhm.
used. They were used to guys either using orderly like bayonet drills and stuff like that, or fighting at long range. And then we
No
just
street brawling.
and like a bunch of New York street gangers that end up getting drafted into the army, or a bunch of Marines that were trained in shipboarding operations and stuff like that. So we're used to fighting in close quarters. It's just like, put us in a trench with a shotgun, and we're just like, oh, I know what to do.
Yeah.
This is nice.
And immediately just start eviscerating everything around us. But
Works.
and this is also where one of the best freaking quotes from all of Marine Corps history comes from. By one of our heroes, one of only 2 Marines ever to have been awarded the Medal of Honor twice and lived through both attempts.
Wow.
A man by the name of Gunnery Sergeant Dan Daly. Actually, I think he retired a sergeant major.
Okay.
And this is what is very famous. It was made famous by Starship Troopers, but basically to motivate his guys had gotten kind of hunkered down behind some cover, and a machine gun had them pinned. And this is what earned him his second Medal of Honor, I believe. Jumped out of the trench. He was a gunnery sergeant at this point, so he was actually a pretty senior NCO. Jumps out of the trench and freaking yells, "Come on, you sons of bitches! Do you want to live forever?" And just starts charging down the enemy.
Holy shit!
Without even waiting for his guys, he was just going. So
insane.
I mean, that's one of those things where it's just like, oh, well, Gunny's going, so I guess I gotta freaking go. So everyone just charged with him. And yeah, Dan Daly and Smedley Butler, the only 2 that that ever were awarded 2 medals of honor and lived through both attempts. And that's a medal that if you earn it once, it's usually getting pinned on your gravestone.
Yeah.
Like, I think something like 68% of all Medal of Honor recipients don't live through the attempt.
Yeah.
That's kind of messed up. I'm just saying.
Well, I mean, that's what it takes to be awarded that medal, is doing something so suicidally dangerous in order,
basically.
Yeah, in order to either save your own guys or accomplish the mission. And like, in fact, there's one guy in the entire history of the United States military who has been awarded the Medal of Honor and did not kill a single person.
Wow.
If you guys have seen the movie Hacksaw Ridge, that's that guy.
That guy?
He was awarded the Medal of Honor. Absolutely, man. That's why we do it, is freaking for it. That's one of those medals you don't do because you want a medal. You you do it because you were expecting not to live through it.
Right.
And some of them do, and some of the I've actually seen the footage from Dakota Meyer, the incident that awarded him the Medal of Honor, and I'm not sure how he lived, because everyone around him died.
Wow.
Like he should have been dead about 6 different ways, and somehow he wasn't.
That's crazy, man.
Moving on from that one, we've got probably one of the most famous images from World War One of the big red triplane, the Red Baron.
Oh yeah, I remember the how do I put this? The Peanuts animation,
Yep.
of Snoopy.
Oh,
When
Snoopy
I
versus
think
the Red
Red
Baron
Baron,
was like one of the first Peanuts cartoons.
Yep.
whenever I think of the Red Baron, I think of Snoopy in a okay. Whenever I think of Red Baron, I think of Snoopy in an aviator's cap with some goggles and a red scarf around him,
Yep.
flying a doghouse. That's what I think.
Yep. That was one of their first comics. That was actually pretty good, and that just became a thing throughout all of his works. But no, that the Red Baron. I mean, talk about this guy. There were no such things as aviation experts back then, because everyone was kind of figuring out what being a fighter pilot means. I mean, I think I said it in our Glorious Burden episode where he actually got his first 2 kills standing up in the back of a recon plane with a shotgun.
I remember you talking about that. Yeah.
Because there was no such thing as a fixed gun on a aircraft yet. They were basically just observation planes that were flying over the front.
Yeah.
And then one side or the other decided to put a rear turret with a machine gun in it. And then somebody figured out how to, I think it was Anton Fokker actually figured out how to fire machine guns forward in a fixed position through the propeller without actually sawing your own propeller off. And then fighter aircraft were born, and guys like him, Bolka, and all that were basically writing the book on fighter tactics. And he was pretty successful. He downed 80 planes in 3.5 years.
Absolutely insane to think about,
80
man.
planes.
And these are most of those weren't bombers either. Like that's kind of considered like kind of a. I mean, don't get me wrong, you'll do it because you don't want them getting to where they're going. But there's no real like skill or honor in shooting down bombers. It's like you want fighter kills. And most of these guys were against enemy fighters, and most of them were against enemy aces. And this was back in the day. Like these guys were kind of like knights of the sky, where they'd actually fly over each other's aerodromes and like issue duel challenges. Like not even kidding. Like this guy would like attach a message to a brick or whatever and just drop it over the airfield. And it would have a message on it like, "Hey, be up over this sector at this time. We'll duke it out." And he killed an awful lot of enemy aces that way.
Explains why he got such a high number. Yeah.
Because he wasn't just going after their rookies either. He was going after their best. And killing them. And this is the period of aviation too, where if you got shot down, you didn't live through it. Because there was no such thing as a bailout. This was you're riding that thing into the ground or you're already dead. Like in the case of the Red Baron, they think he was actually shot in the head by a random rifle shot from the ground. That they were all just shooting up at him in a volley, and one of them hit him in the head. And so that was the end of him. And I think he died shortly before the end of the war, like April 1918 or something like that. So and there was a lot of that where guys would be through the whole war. In fact, we'll talk about it when we get to In Flanders Fields.
Can I bring up a drag, please?
Sure.
7 Pillars of Wisdom, otherwise known as Lawrence of Arabia in heavy metal form.
Yep. Well, yeah. I mean that, and it's one of the better songs on the album too. One of the best riffs, anyway. That searing twin guitar riff that those guys are so good at doing. And then the two singles for this were Great War Itself, which I absolutely loved. I loved the they did, like, when they first started this tour, they did they actually had a chorus behind them doing this song, and every member of the chorus was dressed up in the uniforms of every country that fought during World War One.
Oh wow.
Even the minor nations. So you had guys out there in Japanese and the Japanese, Serbian, as much as close as every country that actually fought. So I thought that was really awesome.
I like Pooch's comment. Most recent one.
But Great War is, I think, probably the heaviest they get on this record. Which is a good one. A lot of this is more of the speed metal style stuff. Like Seven Pillars of Wisdom, Ghost in the Trenches is another one, which I don't mind. I actually really like a lot of that stuff, but it is an interesting duality.
Yeah.
You also have some really heavy stuff in here, like Attack of the Dead Men and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
And then Fields of Verdun. Absolutely, this was the first track anyone ever heard off this record because it was the first single they released.
Okay.
And holy shit, what a battle and what a song talking about it. Like the whole idea behind Verdun was the Germans were basically trying to bleed the French white. Like they knew they would never break through in the Verdun sector, that they wanted the French to have to pour in so many men and so much equipment that it was unsustainable, and they'd actually fail elsewhere. Unfortunately, it ended up kind of doing that to the Germans.
Wow.
And over like it was like over a 9-month battle, and like hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dead.
Damn.
Yuck.
And they haven't. They'll get to it on the next album, I think. They haven't done one on the Somme, really, which was one of the bloodiest days in British history. Where I think the first hour of that offensive, they lost 30,000 men.
Wow, that's insane, dude.
And this is the first hour of a month-long offensive.
30,000 in 1 hour.
Yeah, I think the death toll at the end of that day was something like 56,000, something like that.
Yikes.
And if you are fans of Red Baron Pizza, know where to address your hate mail. But no, that, like, this war in general, like, you would see casualty totals like that, and it was for almost no gain too. Like, you would think if they were losing that many men, they were like, staging massive breakthroughs. I think the Battle of the Somme, they only ever ended up moving the front line a little under a mile.
Yeah.
And they lost most of that in a subsequent counterattack. It was just the most horrific thing. Like, pretty much, I wish I could find it on YouTube. I may look it up later and try to link it in the description of this video after we're done here. There was a static map showing where the front line was every day on the Western Front. And pretty much once the trenches started going up in late 1914, the front line was almost static. It moved less than a mile for the next 4 years and killed something like 10 million men. Up till, we might as well talk about the end of the war to end all wars and in Flanders Fields. The end of the war to end all wars is a great track and a great way to go out on a metal note. And then all of that massive artillery barrage going into In Flanders Fields, with just a completely acoustic chorus track, which I absolutely loved.
I liked it a lot too. Yeah,
especially because it shows like it's. I love that symbolism of this massive, just cacophonous artillery barrage at the end of it, and then quiet.
Yeah,
because that's exactly how it was. At 11 a.m. on November 11th, 1918, the guns went silent and everything just went quiet. And unfortunately, there were fairly major offensives going on that morning. Like, I don't know, like some of the officers really just wanted to stick it to the Germans one last time before it went before it went live or before the war was over or whatever. But the last guy I remember, when they did the live tour for this album, they were actually talking about some of that. And I think the last known death in World War I was like a Canadian corporal who was killed at 10:58 a.m. So if that poor kid had lived through another 2 minutes, he would have survived the entire war.
Sad.
We'll get to that, Soul Assassin. That's coming. And but yeah, no, this whole album was such a great like concept. I think it counts as a concept album because it's basically telling the story of World War I in a large part. And well, that's what I thought at the time, anyway. And then part 2 of this album came out.
Yes.
The war to end all wars. And the story behind this, I think, is that they had enough material written to basically do 2 albums when they recorded the Great War. They just ran out of studio time, and because they needed, because studio time is expensive, and also they needed to go out on tour. So this kind of got wrapped into a second album, which I really like the way they did that and kind of spread it out a little bit. But I really hope they release this as a double album at some point. Like they just include both in one compilation and send it out, because that's really what this is just another half of the World War I story.
Yeah.
Starting off with Sarajevo, depending on what variant of this album you get, because not all of them have all the tracks, which is interesting.
That sucks.
Yeah, I don't know why they did it that way. But especially because I believe it's a really cool bookend, because Sarajevo and Versailles, the last song on this album, actually have the exact same music behind them, just with different lyrics. And I think that's really cool.
And at the end of Versailles, they transitioned from the changed lyrics, the hopeful ones, back to the original ones from Sarajevo.
Yep. And I thought that was a really cool thing and a really, really great way to bookend this album. And they also, talk about some different types of warfare that was going on, like the second song, Stormtroopers.
Oh man,
that's a great song. Yeah,
and it was an insane kind of combat too, where instead of like the typical bolt action rifles and stuff like that, these guys were actually starting to use, well, in the case of the Germans, quote unquote light machine guns. I don't know if any of you have ever seen an MGO 815. It's literally just a lightened MGO 8. They're a heavy machine gun.
Yeah,
from the war. So it's not that it's light; it's that it's lighter
enough to where you could like carry it around with like a backpack setup, sort of. I mean,
not a backpack setup, but they have like a bipod on it instead.
Bipod,
of a full-on tripod setup, or like a gun sled, which is how they used to have them.
And
this thing still weighed in at like 56 pounds.
Yeah.
Which, if you guys are interested in like the guns of World War I, there's a great channel out there called CN Arsenal that does they're doing all the guns of the Great War. Every gun that was ever used by any nation involved in the war, which is really cool. And they've done episodes on all this stuff. But yeah, the MGO, but so, and the French had the Shosha, which, god damn that piece of crap. It was a machine gun, we'll put it that way. that occasionally functioned the way it was supposed to.
So, and like me, basically.
And then we had a 30-06 variant of the Shosha that we were working on for our troops that was somehow even worse than the original. It was so bad that we didn't even issue it overseas. We were just like, yeah, no. We used them for training, and that was about it. These things were absolutely horrible. The good news is, by the time our guys were actually going over in large numbers, we had the BAR.
What's that?
The Browning automatic rifle.
Oh yeah. That thing brought up in Indiana Jones. Gotcha.
But yeah, so like the Stormtrooper story is basically like, these guys would try to sneak up close to the lines and start trying to basically hit one section of the trench really hard and basically blast a hole into it and kind of spread out from there and try to take control of the trench, paving the way for the regular infantry. And like later on in the war, they had stuff like the Germans started using things like the MP-18, the world's first real submachine gun. And that's also why like things with like a whole bunch of different tactics were invented. That's why the flamethrower exists, for instance. So it was basically used to, kind of try as a kind of way to try to get around the trench warfare stuff, and just rather than just throwing bodies at the problem, which is what they had been doing to that point, or as we like to call it in the business, the old Soviet method.
Or you could call it the Death Corps of Krieg.
Well, I mean that's why everyone loves Krieg so much, is because they are World War One instead of like they are World War One soldiers teleported to the Warhammer 40K universe, which is freaking awesome.
And it was a track on the previous album, believe it or not, Attack of the Dead Men, synced up to a CGI animation of said Krieg.
Oh yeah, I've seen that one by Janovich. Yep, he did it.
That was the one.
He loves the Death Corps. In fact, he actually like has like a really cool like 3D printed minis that he did. It's actually Space Marines that are done up like the Death Corps of Krieg. One of their weapons is the power shovel. It's hilarious.
Power shovel. To quote John Tron, I have several questions.
And yes, World War I was actually the last use of horse cavalry for obvious reasons. It didn't go so well for the horsies.
I've seen enough Battlefield 1 gameplay.
Yeah. A massed horse charge, especially against the machine gun position, is just, yeah. And yes, Soul Assassin, that's why we still have a serrated edge on the side of our E-tools to this day. Yep, there we go. And in almost every war ever since, so at least one person has been that guy and got a confirmed kill with an E-tool.
E-tool?
Entrenching.
Sex toy?
Yeah, entrenching tool.
Oh.
Basically, those little folding shovels that you see on like the back of our packs and stuff. That's what they call an entrenching tool. And usually, some guy will be either sick or desperate enough to actually beat someone to death with it.
Okay. I have even more questions now.
Yeah. But yeah, the Germans did start using they were actually really innovative during the war with using different tactics and different equipment and stuff like that to try to break the deadlock, because the deadlock on the Western Front only played to the Allies' advantages, because the Germans were having to fight both the French and the British at the same time, and the Russians. So they were getting bled white. So the faster the war went for the Germans, the better it would be. So they kept having to come up with new ways of trying to assault positions and trying to break through and break the line and actually start making advances. So they were kind of, if you want to call it, on offense the whole war, or trying to have to be, while also defending themselves against counterattacks. And then we have one of I think the more interesting ones on here musically, which is Dreadnoughts.
Oh! I listen to that one semi-regularly.
I love the intro to it, where it's kind of this like halting kind of stop and start beat to it. Oh yeah, and then kind of goes into the main.
Something like that, yeah.
And they're also adding in variations as we go here. And the interesting part I love that they brought up is the fact that, throughout the entire 1910s, pretty much since the launch of Dreadnought in 1909, 1909 or 1906? I think
I don't
1909.
keep track.
Basically, there had just been this massive arms race between the navies, and everyone needed dreadnought battleships, and everyone needed as many of them as they could get right now. And so they'd spent all of this money and time and resources building all of these massive battleships. And for the first 2 years of the war, they literally sat in port and did nothing, because they were so expensive and so difficult to replace that you couldn't afford to send them out for anything less than a full fleet engagement, which the Germans didn't want to do because they were already they already had a numerical disadvantage against the Royal Navy. So it was kind of this weird thing where, as the war is going on the Western Front, the main battle fleets of Germany and England were just kind of sitting there staring at each other across the North Sea.
So basically, my takeaway from this is the military is incredibly incompetent.
It's not incompetent. It was that these things were so expensive that you couldn't afford to lose them.
But if you can't afford to lose them, then why make them in the first place?
Well, because you had to have them because your enemy already had them.
Yeah, but if they're too expensive to use, don't use them. Don't make them.
Well, the British had them because that was just the next evolution of their battleship. And it was a very natural evolution, and there's a reason they came up with it. And we were actually shortly behind them, because we had designs for the South Carolina class actually before they had Dreadnought. It was just that they built theirs first.
Yeah, well, given the fact that they are more expensive, I don't see that as much of an evolution. I'm just saying, okay?
They're much more expensive, but they were also light years more capable.
Oh.
It was the advent of the modern battleship.
Oh.
So
I think I follow now.
Yeah, so like these things were an absolute revolution in in warship design, especially battleships. And these things were faster, better armed, and better armored than anything else out there. So if your Navy wanted to be a first-tier power, it had to compete. And the Germans were trying to build their Navy at that time because a lot of people don't talk about this either. One of the real reasons Kaiser Wilhelm wanted a really strong Navy is his grandmother is Queen Victoria.
Enough said.
So he used to, as a little kid, go over to England every year for royal get together, and it was basically the Royal Navy would be on parade up the Thames River at that time, and so he got to see literally the entire Royal Navy pass in parade, and wanted that for his own nation, and started building the German Navy almost as soon as he took power. But the problem was the Germans were starting from behind, and they were always going to be numerically inferior. So they couldn't risk their grand fleet going out and taking losses because they couldn't afford. They also didn't have the shipbuilding capacity that England did. So they couldn't replace losses anywhere near as fast. So they were really the ones that were like, we can't put our main fleet out there unless we're going to use it and really use it for a full fleet engagement, because we can't afford to replace these things fast enough. So it'll just put us even further behind the British and make us even less likely to win a naval battle the next time. So until Jutland in 1916, these things just basically sat there and stared at each other. And then because they're just on different sides of the North Sea, so they're basically just sitting there across, the gap between the Atlantic and Germany, just kind of sitting there like, well, go on then.
I'm just wondering if these ships could talk like they do in the Cars and Planes movies.
That would actually be interesting, where they're just like, so, anybody got a deck of cards?
It's like, hey, my friends, they want me to blow you up. Yeah, I know. So, you know a way to pass the time? Because apparently I'm too good for them. Man.
Well, yeah, that was the thing too. Is the British didn't want to put their battleships out in the North Sea, basically enforcing the blockade, because German U-boats were a thing and torpedo protection was just starting to be a thing. So they didn't want to lose a 22,000-ton battleship to a 800-ton submarine. Although actually the reverse actually ended up happening, because Dreadnought was old at that point. HMS Dreadnought herself was actually old enough that they were willing to use her for convoy escort, basically because she was old and kind of obsolete, but she was still useful, so they had her out there. And HMS Dreadnought, the first modern battleship, also became the first and only battleship to sink a submarine.
Wow.
She rammed it. Basically, this thing wasn't paying attention and kind of stumbled across her path, and she just ran it right the hell over.
You get him, girl. That's all I can say.
That's one of those, just like, how bad does your watch standard need to be if you didn't notice that there was a battleship over there? They're not exactly designed for stealth.
Especially if you're below the freaking surface of the water.
Well, these things could barely dive down to like 200 feet. So they spent most of their time either at or just below the surface, and would only really dive deep if something like a destroyer came after them. So this thing was just kind of probably tooling around, probably going after the convoy that Dreadnought was protecting. I was just trying to creep in on it and didn't see the naval equivalent of a freight train barreling down on it.
Oh, man.
Either way, that's kind of one of those interesting stories. And Jutland itself is actually it's an interesting battle, but really nothing happened. They just went out, shot at each other for a day, and the British lost like 4 battle cruisers, and then they all just sailed home and then sat back in their ports again until the end of the war. Other than that, like the Royal Navy did actually do some stuff in other theaters, like chasing down German commerce raiders and stuff like that. And other fleets did like assist in things like the Gallipoli landing, for all the good that did. Because that was a massive goat rope, which Sabaton's also done a song about on another album. I think Coat of Arms, I want to say. In Cliffs of Gallipoli. But
did you say Sabaton? Like
yep.
Shab?
No, Sabaton.
I think I heard Sabaton.
But no, that this entire album is freaking awesome. The Unkillable Soldier, I'm actually not so sure what that song's about because I haven't seen the episode on that yet. But Soldier of Heaven, I think, is probably one of the underrated songs on this album. And it's also a theater that no one talks about, where the Alpine War, where you actually had, like, I've seen like descriptions of how this worked, where it was basically trench warfare but vertical.
Okay.
Like these guys would be dug into the side of the mountains and attacking each other either up or down. It was just like, what? If something, I'm not sure anything could make less sense than trench warfare, but they found a way. But in general, like the lyricism in this one, especially the musicianship, is just big. It's bombastic. It's epic. It's pretty much everything that makes Sabaton.
Mm-hmm.
That describes this album as a whole, really. And then one of the standouts was also the single for it, the Christmas Truce.
That's a good
story too.
That's a really fucking good song and an even better story.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you know, guys ever play the online shooter Verdun, where every other day of the year it's World War I era combat, where trench warfare, shit like that. But every year on Christmas Day they do the Christmas Truce. So instead of World War I era warfare, it's you're kicking a soccer ball around and throwing snowballs at each other.
Aww,
which I think is pretty cool because, again, it's one of the coolest stories in military history where for a day, the war just kind of got put on hold and dudes just got to be dudes on the front line.
Oh, I remember listening to that song, and I was listening to the the singer, right? He's playing
Yep.
piano, and I'm like, this sounds kind of like a reprisal of Carol of the Bells, and it makes sense because that's a Christmas song. So I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. I like this. But yeah, it's a great fucking song.
Yeah, he's actually a very talented musician too. He plays piano, and I believe he plays guitar as well.
Yeah.
On some of the songs on these records, even.
Okay.
Like
cool.
they'll have like if they need like a third guitar part, he'll kind of come in and do that real quick.
Yeah.
And I've seen him do it live too.
Very cool.
Which I think is cool. So apparently he's a very multi-talented musician because playing piano and playing guitar are two very different skill sets, and it's also even though he's not a trained singer, he does pretty damn well at it.
Yeah.
Oh man, that Christopher Lee metal album, man. I'm gonna have to do a solo review on that at one point because that's like right up my alley of this like military of like history metal done by Christopher Lee and Richie Faulkner from Judas Priest.
Oh
yes, please.
Yeah,
that sounds awesome.
I mean, if you've never heard both of his albums, they're I would heavily recommend it. They're well worth a listen. But Christmas Truce, they blew everyone away when they came out with that at Christmas too, because they hadn't even teased a new album yet.
Huh.
So they
wow.
So they just kind of dropped this like right in front of Christmas, and everyone's just like, "Ooh, Sabaton does Christmas songs now,"
right?
Which I thought was really cool. And then they had and then they released the album in February, and they kind of caught people flat-footed because they didn't really promote it all that much, and everyone just kind of went, "Oh, okay."
Right.
And then within a week, I'd already done my review on it, which is actually Rock and Roll Religion episode 4, I want to say. Like back when I was doing these things solo. Which I actually might start doing again for stuff that's like a smaller topic that, we can't do an hour and a half, 2 hours on.
Right.
Like bands like perfect example is another one I've done already is Fortress, which they only have one record. There's a couple other bands I want to do a review on that. They only have like 1 or 2 records, so there's only so much we can say on it.
Yeah.
And yet I want to spotlight them because that's how these younger bands get press and get traction. Like I'll probably do on Sentinel knows this band very well, Riot City.
Yep.
They're up and comer that I really want to talk about. But
when we do that new wave of traditional heavy metal, show, well, that's definitely somebody we got to cover. Enforcer, Skullfist, Ambush, of course, Burning Witches, all of them.
Yeah, we're definitely going to do that sometime soon, I think. I just don't want to do it this next week because that's actually the topic that me and 70s are going to be talking about tomorrow. So I want to kind of spread that out a little bit. And we might or might not have a very special guest tomorrow.
Oh, very cool.
I'm not going to go into who it is, but it's somebody we all know.
Yeah.
Can you at least give a hint?
No.
You'll just have to tune in and find out.
Yep.
Well, more reason to check it out.
It's one of those, if I give too many hints, it'll be painfully obvious. And, we want to leave some surprise in it.
Right.
But you're just going to have to tune in and find out.
Oh boy, okay.
but no, and then like we said earlier, with Versailles parroting Sarajevo in ways, and then venerate, and then kind of goes into I love the change in tone halfway through this song too, where it goes from very bright and optimistic and hopeful about the future after this war, and then it goes right back to that darker riff, and basically just admit that it changed nothing.
Yeah.
Or that it hadn't ended wars and had done virtually no good.
Yeah.
And really, if you look at the Treaty of Versailles, it had just kind of made World War II inevitable.
Yeah. There's another really good track that I enjoyed on this album. I think it was like 1 or 2 tracks before Christmas Truce, but it's Lady in the Dark, I think it is.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I actually don't know the story behind that one either.
I think I could be wrong on the information, but I know that I think it was the Russians. They had a
Oh yeah, that's
female
right. Yep.
sniper that joined, and they mention it in the song too. She basically picked up the role for her brother because I think her like brother had passed away really early in the war, and so she was fighting for her family and
You saw a lot
didn't
of that
have any
on the
family
Russian,
left. Mm,
in both world wars on the Russian side, where
yeah,
some woman's brother or father or somebody would get killed.
and they would pick it up.
In one very famous case, it was her husband, and
Yes, the
she,
one who ran a tank, right?
yep, she not
Yeah.
only ran the tank, she bought it.
Yeah, yeah, she bought the tank
She paid for it
and
to be built, trained the crew,
mhm,
and then demanded that she be allowed to drive it.
and she was one of the,
She was
best tank
actually,
crews or, like,
yeah,
the best tank crew I think they
I
had
don't think she was like their top scoring ace, but she was up there. Like she was
up
one of
there,
their
yeah.
better. She was one of their better tank
Yeah,
crews, and I
yeah.
thought that was an awesome story of just like that's how much you have pissed us off as a nation. We have widows buying a tank to
Yeah,
go and hunt your ass down personally.
yeah,
I know, right?
yeah. I'd
Hey, modern
be
Hollywood. Hey, this, take your hands.
Actually, the Russians have been making a lot of war films recently. I would not be
yeah,
surprised if they make one about her because
it
that
would
would
be
actually be
cool.
really fucking cool.
I bet Sabaton would make a song about her too, like, if they
I'm,
start getting the World War II stuff.
it's everything. Well, I mean, they've been into World War II stuff for a while. In fact, we're going to talk about
Right.
some of their extracurricular activities in terms
Mm,
of singles they put out.
Oh boy.
Absolute bangers like Bismarck,
mhm.
Oh yeah.
which Sentinel, you'll recognize the opening riff from Bismarck instantly.
I
It's
will.
it's literally the hell. It's literally the Hellion by Judas Priest.
Oh, that's right. Yes, of course. Now I remember the song you're referring to.
Yeah,
Couldn't
and
remember the name.
like they add embellishments and they add a little variation into it, but I'm
Yeah,
just
they
like,
totally make it their own.
yeah, but I'm
And
just
it
like,
sounds
Mm.
different enough that if you never heard the Hellion before, you wouldn't recognize it.
but given that that's my favorite record, I like heard Bismarck for the first time. I'm like,
This is Judas Priest. You were
I'm like,
probably thinking.
wait a minute. It took me a couple times to get which one it was, but I'm like, I've heard this riff somewhere. Like, wait a minute, this is like I've heard this somewhere before. That doesn't
Right.
stop it from being an absolute classic of a song, pretty much instantly.
Agreed.
And talk about like this is absolute epic. And I've seen them do it live too, and it's just as powerful, if not more so, when you hear it live. And I'm surprised they hadn't put that on an album before it. And like, this is a band was going at the time into their 17th or 18th year of life, and they hadn't done a song on one of the biggest, most important, or one of the biggest topics in World War II. Being, everyone does songs on the Bismarck.
Mm.
And I think they just hadn't found the right time or hadn't found the right album to do it on, and eventually they just released it as a single. And then the other one, which they just released right ahead of this in like October, was Steel Commanders, which is an absolute monster, real speed metal track, where it's basically going over the history of tanks from the unsurprisingly in partnership with World of Tanks. So,
Steel Commanders.
Yep.
Oh man, I remember putting that one on loop while I was playing Dune 2000.
Yeah, makes sense. But like the whole thing is just had that pounding double bass all the way through it, and it's just fantastic musicianship. And
Mhm.
Don't forget
it,
Tina Duo. She played
yes,
it.
yes, she a Chinese violin, which is like a 2-string violin, which is really cool. Although on the album version you can't really hear, or the actual release version you can't really hear much of her.
I couldn't really even hear much of it on the YouTube version either, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean it's there, but it's kind of in the background. But no, I mean it actually reminds me a lot of their older stuff. like off of like a Terra Dominatus and their earlier output, where it's a lot more speed metal. Songs like Counter Strike or Panzer Battalion or something like that, where it's just real in your face, almost outright speed metal, just that high tempo sound that a lot of power metal bands do really well with. I know Hammerfall, like that's where they live pretty much. Like Glory Hammer as well, where Glory Hammer is just the most this is the most glorious, ridiculous Scottish thing I've ever seen. But
you have to enlighten me.
I'll
Not now. Later.
I'll link them to you on Gilded later. They're pretty ridiculous. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at that, man, because that came out shortly before Assassin's Creed Odyssey came out. And if you haven't played that game, if you're interested in ancient history, it's well worth a playthrough, just because you get to walk around ancient Greece at the height of its power and just kind of go like, holy shit, I get to climb on the Parthenon now.
Yeah. I'll say, because I played both that and Origins, I will say that even though they're not like the old Assassin's Creed games, they're still really good in the fact that like it's I wouldn't say like a one-to-one model of what like ancient Egypt and ancient Greece were, but it's so damn good, like how well they portray everything. And yeah, like you said, like at the height of Greece's power, and just you see all these statues and all the buildings and stuff and their splendor and glory. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. I was like almost kind of like doing like a virtual reality tour of it, but without the VR stuff. But yeah.
I may or may not have, intentionally lured people up to the cliff so I could specifically punt them off of it.
Same. That is the best part of the game.
It really is just like, hey, guess what? Yeet.
It's the best part of the game. Sparta kick him off the cliff.
It is rather entertaining. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
I imagine so.
But no, I mean, I can't wait to see what Sabaton does next, because they've got this album came out in February of this year, and this tour, they've already kicked off a tour for it. So I can't wait to see where they go from here. I can't imagine they'd keep going with World War One at this point. They've done 2 albums on it. I feel like that's ground they've covered already. And one thing I like that they have said is that they don't want to do more modern combat.
Okay.
Because they want time for history to kind of edit out some of the political and propagandistic shit that goes on with every war.
Mm-hmm.
And get an objective view, which is something I feel that these guys do very well.
Mm-hmm.
Is they tell the story without editorializing. To an extent. I mean, they did do one on the Holocaust called The Rise of Evil. It's kind of hard not to editorialize on that one.
You have to, yeah.
And also on terrorism within the name of God, which, again.
Yep.
Kind of hard not to editorialize on some of that. But, and they've done it despite getting some pretty serious flack for it over the years. These guys have been called far right, Nazi supporters, all this other shit.
Good Lord!
As far back as Carolus Rex, because they're daring to talk about Swedish history in a positive light. How dare they?
And they're one of us.
Yes, they're the mean. They're the mean, evil, far right people that you want to sing about heavy metal and just have fun. But no, I mean it's
okay.
But no, it's then they've gotten a lot of flack for it over the years, and to an extent, to their great credit, they've never bent the knee to it. They're just like, no, that's not what the song's about. That's not who we are as a band. And if you actually listen to our songs, you'd know that.
Mm-hmm.
And then just walk away. That's how you do that.
Yep.
And then I don't think that's changed. They've always had that message from their first album, Metalizer, all the way up to now. And I don't think that they're going to, because that they literally. The cool part is, like, a lot of bands will do like military theme songs to make a point, whether it be political or social or something like that. These guys are doing it to tell the story of what happened at these parts and the men who it happened to. And I think they have the correct attitude on it. Is like, it was a thing that happened, and you can feel however you want about it, but that doesn't change the fact of what was done here.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think anyone who reads some of those articles about them and then stays away from them, I think you're doing yourself a disservice, because these guys are one of the best bands going at this point.
Yeah. As far as heavy metal,
as far as especially power metal, these guys are leading the charge.
Yeah. They are the face of power metal right now, without a doubt.
And in terms of even just mainstream heavy metal, these guys are one of the standard bearers for the entire genre.
Yep. As far as the entire genre goes, right now they're in the top 10.
Yeah, and even guys I know who don't like or are not huge metal fans have heard of these guys.
Oh yeah.
And have heard their music and are just like, oh yeah, I actually don't mind that. Because, well, I mean, DragonMaster, you're too young to remember, but the early 2000s, you either had the death metal scene, the real hardcore death and black metal scene, or you had new metal. Bands like Disturbed, stuff like that. So, and
that was really it.
Disturbed, yeah.
I mean, they're not bad. They're also not really heavy metal.
Yeah. More hard rock.
Yeah, hard rock and alternative.
DragonMaster, you have no idea how bad the hard rock heavy metal scene was in the late 90s to early 2000s. If you played Master of Puppets, even more heavier kind of traditional thrash, you were kind of mocked because that was out of style or not bold, and these bands were. And it's that attitude took many years to finally kind of wash itself away, to the point where we all could kind of re-embrace it, and you started hearing heavy metal, actual heavy metal, being played on the radio again and being played on MTV again. And then you had shows like Metalocalypse starting to percolate, and you had what's the video games? Rockstar, Guitar Hero. You had Guitar Hero bringing all of that back into the cultural consciousness.
Yeah,
like Dragon Force,
Exactly, Dragon Force. So
that was really the awakening of power metal in the mid 2000s. Was that album by Dragon Force?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they suck live, because that could have gotten a ton of people into it.
They're kind of meh live, but I will say their guitarist Herman Lee is pretty fucking good. But the rest of the band, just I'm kind of mixed on him.
I saw them live at the at a San Jose rock club in California, and I was right next to them, and they fucking rocked it, dude. They rocked it so fucking hard. That entire set, they were playing stuff from their new album, but they were also playing older stuff and familiar stuff. And I was I could swear to God, I was 10 feet away from Herman Lee and the other guitarists, and they were just playing these leads and playing each other's guitars at the same time. It was showmanship at its best. It was fucking awesome. So what I'm saying, DragonMaster, is we were thirsty. Heavy metal fans were so thirsty for some actual heavy metal, and we were getting so sick of having to just kind of put up with and say, yeah, that Linkin Park song is heavy and it's cool, yeah, or yeah, that Disturbed song is cool, or yeah, you kind of it's kind of like we were forced to listen to these kind of bands that, in my opinion, if you compare them to a Sabaton, it's really two entirely different food groups, in my opinion.
Night and day.
Night and day, really night and day. All of the industrial, all of the new metal sound, all of that even with bands like Creed were thought of as like heavy metal and hard rock back then. It was just bad. So I'm glad you didn't have to live through that, and your Generation Z can at least enjoy heavy metal without the collectivism, tribalism of fuck Motley Crue, they're glam, and we're thrash and that kind of shit. It's all cool now, and we can kind of leave the shit, the shit grunge, alternative rock, the bad industrial, the bad new metal, and all that shit where it belongs.
It's all good now.
Taking all of those clothes and giving them to the Goodwill. That's where that shit belongs.
It's all good now, except the emo kids.
Exactly.
You guys,
the Black Veil Brides kids.
You guys are still lame. Don't even fucking try to deny it.
Exactly.
As someone with a bit of an emo side, you're not wrong.
But like a lot of the more modern stuff, like the cool part about like getting back into the scene, because I, especially being on active duty and not really having time to like really be part of the music scene around whatever, I kind of just got out of it and just listened to the bands I'd always listened to and stuff like that. And occasionally I'd get into somebody like Iron Maiden or something like that, like they'd release something new. But even those bands were not releasing anything worth hearing for like, most of the 90s and all of the 2000s, because Maiden was doing stuff like the X Factor, the Blaze Bayley era. Ugh.
Not good, I'm guessing.
Well, we'll put it this way. They took a singer with a 4-octave range and replaced him with a singer with a 2-octave range. That's really low. Like, so you had, oh man.
There's only one song I like with Blaze Bayley's voice on it that they made, and it's Virus. And it's not included on any of the albums they officially released. It was like, that was on Best of the Beast, wasn't it?
Was it?
Compilation album, Best of the Beast. And
they dared to put a Blaze Bayley song on there?
Yeah.
Huh. What?
And it's the best Blaze Bayley song, in my opinion.
Fair. I'm not shitting on Blaze Bayley as a singer. He has his place. It's just nowhere near Iron Maiden.
I know, right?
It's like they made a career on these high operatic vocals, and then you have the guy who's basically a bellowing like baritone scream machine, and then he's having to do the songs that Bruce Dickinson was doing. But no.
About the whole heavy metal thing. First of all, thanks. But I just really hope that we could enjoy, my generation could enjoy the heavy metal, as long as we get past this whole hip-hop craze.
Yeah, that's never going away.
Unfortunately.
I wish it would.
And it's not even it's not even like you guys are discovering like the late 80s, early 90s rap when they actually had a freaking point to make.
Mm-hmm.
And most of it was actually still pretty good. It's this new mumble rap shit where it's just like anybody with a freaking audio editor and a really shitty microphone can become a rapper overnight.
DragonMaster, if you're going to listen to hip hop, go back to like the 90s, the 80s, 90s, and the early 2000s, and stop once you get past 2005 because it all sucks.
Yeah,
how about if you stick with heavy metal and 2 Steps from Hell? That okay?
I mean, I can recommend old school artists like Public Enemy, NWA, and the constituent parts of those, because those guys were all really good. But yeah, the 90s and 2000s, like everyone just kind of, and unfortunately for Sabaton, that's when they started, was 99. They started right in the middle of it.
Yeah, I just wish this modern stuff would meet the same fate the dinosaurs met.
Well, they will.
Bodum, Nightwish, Him, Sonata Arctica, all those bands started in the mid to late 90s.
Yeah.
They were because it was Europe. Europe was inoculated from this bullshit cultural shift in music in America.
And that's how you know it wasn't an organic shift either. This was something that the American record industry did on purpose. Because Europe didn't follow that same trend at all.
Neither did South America
or Japan for that matter.
Yeah,
hell, like you'll hear Japanese metal bands that sound like they came out of the late '80s. That's freaking, like from the time period, and they just never stopped. Bands like Anthem, Loudness, stuff like that. Like they're actually really good.
Oh, and the highest-selling album of 1994 in Japan wasn't Mariah Carey's Fantasy or whatever it's called. It was Yngwie Malmsteen's Seventh Sign.
I can see that. That's a fucking fantastic album.
It is. And I own all of Malmsteen's stuff. That is a great album.
Yngwie, we'll have to do a stream on Yngwie.
We've got to do a stream on Yngwie too, man.
Because he is just an absolutely brilliant guitarist. Kind of a terrible human being, but that's neither here nor there.
He's a total asshole, but he's an asshole who's like Eddie Van Halen. He's got the chops, he's got the technique, he's got the legendary status, and he can write great fucking heavy metal songs.
Mm-hmm.
Great heavy metal songs.
In fact, the only thing he can't do is sing, which is unfortunate because that's what he tries to do on his later albums.
Jesus,
that sounds sad.
That's what happens when some of these guys get old and they get even more recalcitrant and set in their ways, and it's like, Yngwie, please call Ripper, call somebody.
Although in his case, I can see why that he doesn't want someone else singing on his records, considering the last two times he had a singer, the singer ended up stealing his wife. So, I could see why you'd be hesitant to try that again.
All right.
But no, I mean, and you can tell, especially a lot of the phrasing and a lot of Sabaton stuff, they listen to a lot of Yngwie stuff too. A lot of the Baroque and neoclassical stuff that in the solos, especially some of the arpeggios and shit like that, are straight out of Yngwie's playbook.
Exactly. And Yngwie, in his heyday, my favorite Yngwie lineup was in the 80s when they had Jens Johansson and Anders Johansson, the brothers, and Jens went on to become a legendary keyboardist in his own right with Stradivarius, and Anders went on to be drummers in multiple bands, most notably Hammerfall.
And I'm not so sure that either their nephew or their younger brother isn't Tommy Johansson from Sabaton.
Oh, him. Yeah, he has his own YouTube channel.
Okay, I've got to check. We got to know for sure. I'm going to check that right now.
Because he's such a brilliant musician, and they're from the same area too. They're all Swedes. And they even look pretty similar. Although in Sweden, that's not hard to do.
Are we talking Sweet Home Alabama thing or no?
No, it's just that they're all tall and blonde.
Oh, okay.
Whew. And a lot of the long hair, the long straight hair thing is a thing in Scandinavia. I don't know why.
Hey, it makes them look more heterosexual than some American people, so I'll take it.
That is a very, very good point. All hot topics must die. This is true.
Holy shit, they've got a Sabaton wiki.
Do they?
They do.
Are you surprised?
I'm hoping I can find out whether Tommy is related to Anders or Jens.
Because it wouldn't surprise me in the least, especially given the level of musical talent that guy has.
Well, they're not saying. I figured if he was related to them, they would definitely say it in biographies, and they make no mention of it in either the wiki or just the regular Wikipedia.
Okay, so maybe he's not. I mean, it's not like Johansson's a uncommon
exactly. Yeah, that's either that or he changed his name to Tommy Johansson because of the connection. And it sounds cool, Tommy Johansson.
Yeah, it does. But no, all of their I mean, it's not unusual though. A lot of this stuff is a very insular community. Like I said, their drummer is married to Floor Jensen from Nightwish.
Metal has become one big happy family in many ways these days.
Happy's a stretch, but you know.
That's true. But who else?
We're jerks who want to get along, okay?
Well, that's the thing too. All these guys tour so much and in the same places that everyone's been on this tour with that guy and has done a collab with these guys and stuff like that. Like it's become this big, especially in the extreme metal circles, like we say on here all the time, where like some of these guys, and especially black metal, these guys will be in like 4 different bands with different members of other guys' different bands. So it's this really weird web of who's in whose circle. Or pentagram, as the case may be. But no, it's a really cool community to be part of again, and they're actually producing good music and producing like music that's really breaking into the mainstream again for the first time in
20
decades.
Years. For 20 years.
Unfortunately, it only took our entire childhoods.
I know.
We grew up thinking grunge was rock and roll.
I grew up in the generation that thinks hip hop, modern hip hop, is good music.
That is also fair.
I would take 80s Tina Turner over any grunge band besides Alice in Chains.
Yeah, I see. Maybe some Stone Temple Pilots. They had some good stuff too. Although Scott Weiland has done much better stuff with Velvet Revolver than he ever did with STP.
Yeah, Velvet Revolver is, I think, underrated.
I think you get the best parts of both STP and Guns N' Roses out of that band.
Yeah.
Because you not only have Slash in the band, you also have Duff McKagan.
That's that first, and Matt Sorum on drums.
Yeah, it's true. So it's basically Guns N' Roses just without the asshole. I mean, Axel, sorry.
Yeah, you're good.
But no, I mean, and Green Day was considered punk back then.
Yeah.
Truly a dark time.
If there's anybody who's like a punk fan out there, is pop punk really punk if it's pop?
No, it's not.
That's what I figured.
It's just that this pop punk shit, like punk is dead. Like actual hardcore punk has been gone since the 90s.
You can't bring it back either. Culturally, it wouldn't work because if punk...
Oh, you get canceled as soon as you tried.
Absolutely. Can you imagine, what's his name? God damn it.
Johnny Rotten going on the freaking BBC with a swastika on his arm?
Let alone, yeah, either that or, God, I cannot remember the name. It was something and the Scum Fucks.
Oh, no. Shit. I know you're talking about it. I don't remember his name, though.
I know. Yeah, that guy. That was like the last true punk rocker in many ways.
I mean, hell, Black Flag would get canceled these days.
Yeah.
Black Flag Coffee?
No, Black Flag as in the band.
Oh.
If Black Flag released Rise Above today, it would be considered a white nationalist call to arms.
Oh, yeah.
So basically the same as the coffee company.
Yeah, except not a bunch of cucks like Matt Best and Black Rifle. And yeah, Matt, I fucking said it. I actually don't mind him, but some of the people who work for him are absolute guns.
I'd agree, yeah.
And
a lot of controversy embroiled with that whole thing.
Oh, yeah. And they kept trying to walk it back and then not walk it back. And then just like, at some point, pick a fucking lane.
G.G. Allen was the guy I was thinking.
Oh, G.G. Allen. Yeah, that's right. And yeah, that whole group was, wow. But I mean, you would, and that was the community you would have actual white nationalists in.
Exactly.
And it didn't matter because we were all, I mean, all of them were just there to freaking do nothing. Yeah, just make music and just complain about shit and throw each other around for a while. and it kind of didn't matter because everyone knew what lane they belonged in, and everyone stayed in it. Unfortunately, now they're trying to make it so that, like, oh, you can't be at these concerts. It's like, no, they can be here just as long as they behave themselves.
It's just kind of they're trying to make metal into this safe, like,
which is the farthest thing it's ever supposed to be.
Exactly. They're like websites like Loudwire and Blabbermouth and
fuck Loudwire.
They want it into this like gruel, this like generic, safe, soupy gruel that people can easily consume, and that's not heavy metal, man. It's dangerous.
Have they not even listened to Stryper? For
crying
out loud. It's like, yes, they're Christian, but the thing is, they don't. Their music is blatantly Christian most of the time, and
in a scene where it's not popular to be.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's just.
And metal is all about going against the grain and saying shit people don't want to hear and stuff like that. And oh man, I put it up. Sentinel, I know you saw it when I put up Dee Snider's speech in front of the PMRC.
Mm-hmm.
God, I miss that era of metal. I miss that era of metal. And
I miss that Dee Snider. I wonder what he's.
I miss.
Doing.
Whatever
happened to him?
He got his balls cut off, and Actually, I don't know if that's actually true. He just behaves like it. This day and age, you'd call it transphobe for even saying that. So, oops. Oh well. Come at me, bro. I don't give a shit if you were in Twisted Sister once in a long time. No one's given a shit about you since 1985.
Exactly. The way he saved his career. Well, side topic is the way he saved his career after Twisted Sister's relevancy ended in '85 was he became the guy in the media. Dee Snider, host of Metal Video Hour. Dee Snider, host
he had his own radio show for a
while. Radio show. So he likes to hear himself fucking talk, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Not surprising. He's from New York.
Yeah.
Oh Lord.
You Bostonians and your hatred for New York and vice versa.
Oh, I mean, well, if Imperatus was here, he'd say the same thing. But no, I mean that I think is going to have a very hard time staying relevant in heavy metal. That whole attitude, because the real bands are always going to reassert themselves, and the genuine ones are always going to shine through in the end.
You know, country music has this issue, and it has been having this issue for the last 20 years, because country had outlaw musicians in it, like literal outlaw musicians in it, and that kind of got phased out for the Shania Twains and the Taylor Swifts. And so you've got this
and some of it was actually still good at that point.
Yeah.
Like I've said it before on this channel. I actually am a fan of Brad Paisley. Me and my dad went to go see him a couple months ago. He's actually really good. But
I hate to say this, but I love that David Allan Coe crossover with Pantera.
Yeah.
It's so funny at times. Some of the lyrics, it's just hilarious.
David Allan Coe is hysterical in his own right.
I know, right? Some of the shit, they're not writing it to be taken seriously. They're writing it to make it entertaining.
And David, in terms of lyrical content, David Allan Coe is basically the country version of Steel Panther.
Yes, you get it. None of these other assholes get it. They think he's like this Klansman or something.
It's like, no, he's making fun of the whole thing.
I know,
right? But no, it's. Oh, and the same. I've heard rumblings about that with speaking of Pantera now too. That, oh well, they're white supremacists because they use Confederate images. It's like, oh my fucking god, no! It's like you are not going to go after Dimebag Darrell on my fucking watch.
Yeah, fuck that shit.
I'll just grab the popcorn and watch.
Oh, the funny part is, like, as much as he's not a Pantera fan, and neither am I really, except early stuff.
Yeah, no one cares about Pantera. If I had a Pantera shirt, I'd wear it painting. That's how.
Well, Pantera. I
Nobody
mean,
cares about
early Pantera was great, and like Cowboys from Hell is an absolute classic.
Mm-hmm.
But the funny part is, like, even as much as he's not a Pantera fan, you'd see if somebody really started coming after Daryl, you'd see the fucking Razor Fist come out the back like a goddamn superhero, and just start fucking laying smackdowns to people on Twitter.
I'd watch that rant.
Oh, he's made it before on somebody was trying to cancel Marduk because yeah, they're freaking like they're like white nationalists. They're just too coy to say it. It's like, are we talking about the same band?
I would have loved to have been on Twitter in 2015 during the whole Phil Anselmo, Rob Flynn.
Oh God, that shit was hysterical.
It was right.
Where Rob Flynn would do the internet equivalent of shitting all over his own feet,
exactly.
And then Phil would just sit there making fun of him for it.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, DragonMaster, if you didn't know what happened, Phil was doing this like dime bag tribute show, and Rob Flynn was there, and Phil was drunk and making this kind of inside joke about white wine, saying white power, and throwing up some like Hitler salutes, and Rob Flynn went, "This is my time to shine," and
Hang
he
on a second.
made this video attempting to cancel Phil Anselmo for it.
Because Rob Flynn, for those of you who don't know, is the idiot leftist that runs Machine Head.
Hey guys, unfortunately, I gotta drop out. It's I gotta eat.
All right.
Okay.
Have a good one, man. Thanks for being
Have
here.
a good one. Yeah.
No
See you later, dude.
Y'all have fun. And hopefully, modern pop music or modern hip hop or whatnot goes the way of the dinosaur.
Dying in a meteor explosion, I think, was a fitting fate for modern pop music. Maybe do it in reverse, where we just shoot it into the sun.
I'm all for that. Just take all the mumble rappers with them, shoot them into the sun. Fuck that shit.
Absolutely.
God,
it's like certain musical trends. It's like, although there's that style of music in every decade.
True.
70s disco, looking at you here.
True. What would we say about the 80s if we wanted to like yeet a specific style of the 80s into the sun? Because like personally, as cringe as it is, I'm actually kind of a fan of the guitar, and like some bands that have used the guitar that have pulled it off pretty well.
Like some of the synth pop stuff.
Synth pop's not bad. I'm not usually a pop fan, but like, hey, I like synths.
Honestly, a lot of the 80s pop music is still like, not really a fan of, like, it's not really my genre, but it's not bad. Like,
It's
especially
not
like
bad.
early Prince, Michael Jackson, stuff like that. Like,
right, absolute legends.
Hey,
Madonna.
even early Madonna is actually pretty good.
Yeah, I don't know about Madonna these days.
Oh God,
but early Madonna was decent. But man,
Madonna past Y2K, yeah, skip it.
Yeah. Are we talking about like specifically like 80s? What would we want to get rid of from the 80s?
From the 80s,
new wave, in my opinion. I could do without Duran Duran for the rest of my life.
Fair.
Yeah.
Some of the hair metal stuff I could take or leave. Europe.
Yeah.
Which, oh man, it's too bad Paris isn't here. He would have so much to say on this topic. He all you have to do is mention the word Europe around him, and he will go on to a rant about that album.
Oh man.
But yeah, the 80s.
So Weird Al Yankovic started in the 80s, right?
Yeah, that's true.
That's true. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, in terms of 80s musical styles, like, I can't really think of one that's like outright horrific. I mean, 80s punk was still pretty good. You had metal coming into its own. Mainstream rock scene was still there.
Hardcore was coming into it. Really.
Yeah, hardcore was actually starting to come into its own, and so the more extreme metal genres. Mm-hmm. Then country was just kind of doing its own thing at that point.
Yeah.
And And even the pop stuff's pretty good. And then you had like, synthwave and shit like that pop up, and most of that's pretty listenable too.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad that that's coming back too.
What was it? Fucking. I can't believe I'm actually fucking forgetting the name of right now, but they do that really popular electronic song that you hear all the time. Or it's just two guys.
Daft Punk.
Daft Punk, right? Did they start in the 80s or was it the
I
90s?
think they did start in the 80s. They didn't really get popular until the 90s, though.
Okay. Yeah.
Which
I've had quite a few psychedelic trips listening to Daft Punk.
they've had their own, or synthwave and electronic has had their own kind of flew a little too close to the sun and now it sucks moment.
Yeah.
You had like throughout the 90s, you had like really cool like electronic stuff, and they were kind of playing around with techno and all that kind of stuff. And then dubstep came about, and it all went to shit.
It's definitely not my favorite style of electronic to listen to. Like I prefer like guys like Armin van Buuren, so like house and trance music specifically, like stuff you'd expect to go and listen to at a festival or like at a club in like Europe or something like that, but the clubs out here, and I've been to a few nightclubs out here, drinking with friends and then picking up chicks, all that normal stuff. And some of the dubstep music I would hear, even at like dance parties, I'm just like, I can't, man. I can't.
Yeah. It's like actually painful.
It is painful to listen to, yeah. And like some of the fucking some of this shit, man.
It's
but
like,
anyway,
and like like we're the last people to get triggered by most things musically, and when like we're sitting there and like you get that eye twitch, just like nope, I need to leave.
I have left parties more than once because of that music. Like rap I can put up with, but when you put on the dubstep, like I'm taking this bottle and I'm leaving.
It's like no thank you. I lived through the dial-up days. I've heard that sound before.
Fucking right.
But no, I mean, now that we're done shitting on just about every musical genre there is, I think we'll close this out. I mean, we've been going for like 2 hours, which for this topic is pretty substantial. On just, and it's just, this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to them. And we'll probably do revisit these guys at some point to do their earlier stuff, because there's some gems in their early years, including probably the most modern song they've ever done. Or the closest to modern times, anyway, that they've ever done, and they actually kind of regretted it. But no, we'll definitely do a part 2 on this, because it'll go in the list. I have a whole notebook of shit lying around of ideas I'm planning.
Cool.
But and as I always say, like guys on the panel, guys in chat, like if you guys want to add something to the list, put it down in the comments after the video's over, or send me a message on Gilded, and we'll try to make it happen. Because I'm all about either, and especially if it's a band I haven't listened to. Like coming up at the end of August, I think we're going to be doing an episode with Riding Raven.
Okay.
Oh, very fun.
And we're going to be doing, I think, Motionless in White.
Hey, that's actually a pretty decent
she
modern
requested,
metal band.
Yeah, she requested it, and I'd never heard of them, so I'm going to give them a spin and really get to grips with them. Because I'm always looking for new shit.
Their most recent album that they just released, I would recommend, because I've been seeing a ton of my friends on Instagram that I follow, also play music. They've been recommending that album like crazy. I'm like, really? Because I'd heard of Motionless in White like back in the early 2000s when they were like just starting out, and I used to see them in local shows. It's like, okay, these guys are all right, but I guess they've been through a few lineup changes and they've really found their sound now, and like apparently their new stuff is like the best that they've put out so far. So yeah, and it's not to say that their older music is bad, but yeah, it's just from what I've heard. I haven't listened to those guys since like when I was saw them at shows like 2015-ish, like kind of when I was like in college and going to shows a lot more.
Writing
But
Raven
yeah.
is the goth, so I'm very interested in hearing whatever heavy metal band she's interested in too. Because if she likes it, I'll probably like it because I like goth music too.
Yeah, yeah.
And Soul Assassin, I mean, if you guys saw the BattleTech video I put up last Sunday, like when something pisses me off to the point where I feel the need to do a video on it, I will. That was more just disappointment at the state of that hobby. Which, you know, if you guys want to see my views on that, the videos on my channel. Actually, like it's by far like the most viewed video I've ever had. Like normally I'll be sitting at like 70, 80 maybe. This is straight up at like 230 last time I checked. So apparently I must have just hit the algorithm or something.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I will probably be doing more of that. Like last night I did a review of this little monster right here.
Oh yeah, yeah.
If you guys want to take a look at that, it's not long. It's like a 4-minute video, but I'll probably do more stuff like that on my own time, and then we'll still do this every week. So that way, like, you know, I can easily see like stuff that like wouldn't really warrant its own stream on here, but is more than worth talking about. So yeah, we'll get that. So keep an eye out for those coming in the near future. But as to that, Herbs, what do you got going on?
What is up? Yeah, so probably a break from streaming for a couple of days, try to get over this HUD cold. Been going through fucking my voice started going last night. Like it's a little bit better today, but yeah, I'll probably be back like Monday or Tuesday streaming. But yeah, working on some music again finally. Actually got a project in the works. Can't really talk much about it, but it's definitely a long-term project I'll be doing some music for. But yeah, other than that, still streaming on Twitch, twitch.tv, SgtHerbs, and yeah, other than that, working on some YouTube content I'll be releasing soon. But yeah, you can usually find me streaming at Twitch, but that's pretty much it.
All right. And Sentinel, what do you got going on?
I am really, really busy with stuff outside of YouTube right now, but I'm trying to give some content out, and right now I'm going back and forth between action figure photography and video editing. So if you don't see anything on my YouTube channel lately, check out my Instagram page at the Sentinel 43 on Instagram. You'll find some goodies there that I uploaded as well. So, but I will get back to doing some game streams as soon as possible.
Awesome. And as for me, I'll probably actually be, give me like an hour or two, and I'll probably be over on Twitch streaming some more BattleTech because we did that last night for like 3 hours. And I had a lot of fun doing it.
Right on.
Sounds good.
So I'll probably be over there, you know, playing some Stompy Robots and blowing stuff up. And then, yeah, next week we'll be back here for another episode. I think we'll be doing Hellhammer and Celtic Frost to kind of round out the first wave of black metal. So that should be a good sign. And other than that, like I said, keep an eye on the channel page or whatever, because I will put up occasional videos on just stuff I want to review and stuff like that. I'll probably be doing a lot more work on that in the near future. So, yeah, with that being said, thank you to everybody for being here. Thank you to my panel for coming out.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me again, man.
Thank you to the chat, as always. You guys are freaking awesome. And probably more knowledgeable than the guys up on the panel.
That's usually how it happens.
Yeah. Chat knows all.
In the chat we trust.
Chat knows all. Chat sees all. But no, I mean, thank you for being here. This has been freaking nuts. Like, I'm over 100 subscribers now, so it's just like,
hell yeah.
I never thought I'd get this far.
Hell yeah. Yeah, it's been awesome doing this with you the past few months, man.
Yeah, and like it seems like it's actually something people want to hear, and I get a lot of messages like that from either
That's
from both
awesome to
within,
hear.
inside and outside the
That's
community.
awesome to
So
hear, because if this can be like almost like a Friday Night Tights, but for heavy metal, cool.
oh my
Fuck
god,
yeah.
that would be hilarious.
That'd be fucking awesome. We could get people like Dan Vasco on here.
just get a bunch of grumpy metalheads just sitting here
Right.
ripping on each other and sharing memes.
Exactly.
Hell yeah.
And oh man, if we ever got Dan on here, I would absolutely just lose it. Like that would be fucking
Same.
great.
That'd be fucking awesome, man.
And especially if we can get him on here to like talk about like one of his like some of the stuff he's doing with Fearless, or some of his own stuff. That would be hilarious.
Oh man, at some point this week I will show you one of the guitarists that I've been watching on YouTube for a while. Does his own YouTube show, but he's been in a couple of different metal bands, and I guess I would put them more in like the Swedish death metal category, because that's where he's from.
Okay.
The does Whenever he goes to Nam, which is like Comic-Con but for music specifically,
Okay.
he'll do like the sit down like coffee with Ola, and Ola, most Swedish name, right? It's like John for English or American people, but he'll do like coffee with Ola, and he has just like a bunch of different metal musicians sit down with him and stuff. It's really cool. I'll have to show it to you later, but
Awesome.
yeah, I just thought of that like when we started talking about like Friday Night Tights for metalheads. I'm like, oh hey, you probably like this. But yeah,
Excellent.
yeah.
That sounds something like that. That sounds like something that's right up my alley.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
But yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I'll be on Twitch later. Make sure you check out these guys. They do some really good content. Herbs occasionally has a good game of Warzone every now and again.
Yeah, occasionally.
But with that being said, stay healthy, stay safe. I love you all, and I'll catch you next time.